Welcome to our podcast, When Life Gives You Lemons. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Palmy. We consider ourselves disability advocates and intend to highlight some disability issues and things we find interesting that we frequently encounter when we're out and about. Also, some history on disability that we find interesting. This year, we're going to include more of the interviews of the people that the disability affects. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, hi, everybody.
I'm here too.
And what are we doing today, Palmy?
We're having an interview with Thomas.
Okay, Thomas lives in the Northeast as well. What I'm going to do is, he did not give me his contact information other than his phone number, and I'm not going to give out any of his information unless he tells me he wants it that way. So perhaps next time I'll give you both our interviewees' contact information.
But if you have questions or something, you can go through Kevin and he can talk to Thomas and forward it.
Yeah, that's where we'll leave it for right now.
Enjoy the interview, though. So
we're here today with Thomas, who is going to tell us about his experience with SCI. Thomas, last time on the podcast, we told our listeners that there are different types of SCI. So can you go into a little bit of detail about which one you're dealing with?
Yes, so my SCI is all in the cervical area, and it has happened at different times with the different injuries. I was actually born without my top vertebrae, my number one cervical vertebrae.
Oh, yeah.
And so when at 9 years old, I started ice skating and, of course, falling on my backside, which made my vertebrae, that half vertebrae, moved and moved and moved until it was leaning right against my spinal cord. And that caused my first spinal cord injury.
Hey.
And then from there, many, many years later, like 45 years later, I fell in the ice on the way to work, and that herniated another disc in my cervical area, causing another spinal cord injury as they didn't catch it and operate on it for 18 months. And then a year after that, I had another herniation with another spinal cord injury. And now they totally fused my cervical area. But with all those spinal cord injuries, that has left me with mobility issues, with breathing issues, and other problems that I deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I'm sorry to hear all that, Thomas. I'm sorry it took them so long to find that.
Yeah.
Sounds like it would be such a simple thing to find.
Well, you would think so, but I guess I had some other injuries that were masking it. As at the same time, I also tore my ankle, the cartilage in my ankle. So they thought my balance problems were due to that. So they operated on that, and then they sent me to PT for that. And my balance still was very, very bad even after that, was better. So that's why it probably took them longer than under normal circumstances.
Right. Well, where do you live, Thomas? And
I live in
specific address, just state is good.
Yeah, no, I live in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I've tried. I still do physical therapy a couple of times a week. I go to a gym and I walk in the pool with assistance to strengthen my legs. So, I do what I can. I'm sure Kevin, it's one step forward, two steps backwards
Yeah, a
sometimes.
lot of times it is. Let me ask you a question here. I would assume that in Connecticut you got some crackerjack doctors. That doesn't seem to be the case. I live in a more or less rural area, and what I found is that doctors tend to not listen as much as they do talk. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Finding that right doctor is so difficult. And I've had a lot of neurologists that I just didn't click with. And now, honestly, I just see a physiatrist in Connecticut. I have a baclofen pump to help me with my spasticity, and he manages that, and he listens. He is absolutely the best. And
Great.
I know it's hard to find that one doctor, but I've been lucky enough to find him.
Yeah, it took me several years to actually find a neurologist that would, actually listen to me and talk to me and, find out what the hell's going on and all that stuff. But,
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kevin. People should not be, if they don't think they're clicking with their doctor, they shouldn't stay with them. They should continue to look. Why, it's your body, your care. You got to keep looking and find that doctor.
well, unfortunately, Thomas, you live out in the boonies like I do. It's like a 2 hour drive to somebody else that can do the neurologist stuff. So a
Yeah,
lot of it is just plain luck. I happen to have a neurologist nearby in the city next to me that would, that I clicked with. I didn't have to keep driving to St. Louis all the time.
yeah, you're absolutely right. That sometimes, even in an area, it's hard to find, and I feel bad for those folks.
A lot of it is a choice of lifestyle. I assume if you are going to live off the grid in Alaska or
Hmm.
whatever, you've given a little thought to things like how hard it will be to get health care and stuff.
Right.
Perhaps you figure out it's worth taking a risk until
Until, right.
until something happens to you. Right now, I know it would be a lot easier to move to a city, but I really don't like living in the city.
Right. I get that. Yeah.
So I'll put up with the occasional having to go to St. Louis, but first
Right.
3 years that I was trying to get this diagnosis and figure out what was wrong with me was seemed like I was driving there a couple times a week.
Oh, yeah. My doctor is an hour, at least an hour away, so I know what you mean.
Yeah. Well, if all goes well with the traffic, I can kind of make it there in an hour and a half. Like I said, a lot of it depends on traffic.
Yeah. Same here. Same here.
Yeah. So, I guess you say you have a C1 injury.
Yeah, that was my first injury, C1, then down by C4, C5, and then C6.
Yeah, I can kind of see how not having one of your vertebrae affect a lot of areas around it because nothing else. I mean, it's kind of like having a slinky in your neck.
Right.
So, what sort of mobility issues are you dealing with?
So I have a lot of problems, well, certainly with balance. I have no confidence walking, so for the last, this, my last surgery was about 10 years ago, so now I use a walker to get around.
Right?
Um, and it's just, it's very difficult with having no balance. And you know, it affects so much, your strength, just trying to go one place to the other.
Sure, sure. Um, I have a disease that affects the way I walk and talk, kind of like yours, in that it affects a certain part of my brain at the top of my brainstem, and walking, I have no confidence in walking, so I pretty much use a wheelchair everywhere I go. 'Cause there's no telling where my feet are going to go, and I have no balance at all.
Yeah,
So I know exactly how you're describing exactly a feeling I know.
it's and when it first happens, it's a very I don't know the right word, but it seems like yesterday everything was fine, walking to work and everything else, and then here I am today using a walker. So, it's a big adjustment. When I go through airports, I get the wheelchair. Um,
Yeah, you get the wheelchair treatment.
yeah, yeah, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, well, uh, for those of you that don't use a wheelchair treatment going through security is usually a long, involved process.
Yes, it does.
So, what issues do you have with your breathing?
Well, because of this, the spinal cord injury, sometimes the messages from my brain don't go to I guess, my breathing muscles to breathe.
Right,
So it's not so much during the day because obviously I'm awake, but at night I have central sleep apnea where I'll just stop breathing.
right,
So, um, in the beginning, before they caught it, I was stopping breathing like 70 times an hour. So it was really affecting my mental state. But since then, they've put me on a ventilator at night, which is different than a CPAP machine. The
right.
ventilator actually mimics your breathing to help you when you're struggling. Um, so that has really helped, my mental state and helping me stay on track.
Good. Okay. Are you still working?
Well, actually, when this all happened, after my last surgery, and I knew like I said, I live in Connecticut and I used to work in Manhattan. I couldn't go into the city anymore, and my company was kind enough to let me work from home for the last 10 years, and I just retired in June. Um,
Cool.
so, you know, and I say that quite happily that they were kind enough to let me work from home.
Yeah, pre-COVID, that was kind of a rare thing. You had to
Yeah.
work your way up and have an employer that's going to work with you that get that. I wasn't so lucky, so I was just kind of out of work. But anyway, um, back to your situation. What kind of work is it, if you don't mind me
No,
asking?
no, no. It was a project manager for a large financial company. And the truth is that, you know, these days, a lot of the people in the group worked in different locations anyway. So whether they were in Texas or on the other sides of the world, a lot of work was done via the phone anyway. So it just, and then COVID happened. So then everybody was working from home. Um, so it, you know, knock on wood, it all worked out.
Good. I'm glad it all worked out for you. So how's retired life treating you?
You know, about 5 years ago, Kevin, I was in a very, very dark space mentally, obviously. You go through it. I'm sure a lot of people go through it, wondering how you got there. And then, you know, I had an epiphany. It was January of 2020, and, you know, I just woke up one day and said, enough of this. I, you know, stopped taking all the pain pills. And since then, I've mentally tried to turn my life around with the physical therapy. I had my car adapted so I can drive with my left foot, and I get around that way. Um, and I just try to do more and more to, you know, if this is what it is, still have to, you know, live the life. So I do the best I can, and you know, I'm looking to help others, you know, with their mental state and let them know there is life after.
Yes, that's very important because if that depression gets too deep, it can, lead to things like self-harm and all that other stuff, or, you know, varying degrees of lack of self-care. And that stuff can be important. I mean, the self-care. As you said, you're doing the physical therapy because it's pretty important to keep control of what you can't control. Keep your muscles from, you know, uh, just going away entirely, getting some strength in what you can control and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I can really feel it. Like if I do physical therapy, say on a Thursday, and then by Sunday, from you know, just sitting around, especially in the winter over the weekend, I can definitely feel it, for me anyway. So it is important. Not that I'm looking for physical therapy to pull off a miracle, but just for the mere fact that they can just keep things moving is a big plus for me.
Well, that's a good deal. Um, what is your cost of living like there where you are?
It's pretty expensive, only because we're considered like one of those I forget what they call it, but a lot of people from this area commute into Manhattan.
Right.
So it is expensive.
Yeah, we
Um,
have a kind of a couple areas here near St. Louis that are like that. They're close enough that they actually work in St. Louis, so they make quite a decent wage as opposed to like the rest of us in Missouri that don't. So I know what you mean there. And their cost of living is a lot higher there.
yeah,
Cost of, well, everything really.
it's true. Nothing seems to go down, does it?
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's weird how that works. I mean, I get it like right now with the conflict with Iran. I get it. The gas is going to go up. And why does it take so long to go down?
Yeah, exactly.
I can really figure that out. And it's going to be a lot worse on people in, say, Europe that don't have their own oil.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I,
You know,
I remember being stationed in Europe and they'd allow us to buy coupons to get the gas prices down similar to what they are in the US. So we pay with these coupons, that we buy. But, I assume they're, not, it's not going to be anything to brag about right now because our gas is going up too. I don't know how much theirs is going up, but it started off high.
yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, can you think of anything else you want to say?
No, I would say, I guess the biggest thing, and you know, is that it's not the end. There's so much more, you can do even with a spinal cord injury. Um, to stay positive and to get through it, as long as you have your mind and your heart. There's a lot more you can keep doing, even if it's with a walker or in a wheelchair.
Right?
It's the fact that you're still here, you're still talking, you're still breathing, um, and you can still do for yourself and others.
Yeah, you've got a very good attitude about that disability there. And
That's
that's what a lot of people don't understand who are not disabled. We're not asking for like special treatment. We're just asking for the ability to get out there and do things.
right.
I don't know how it is for you there, but I don't have any complaints about people I deal with here, other than usually like whenever I go to a doctor's office, the receptionist has got quite a large desk to hide behind. She's usually covered up by computer screens. So it's like they're yelling my name. I'm going, I'm right here. I'm right here. You just need to go left or right and you can see me. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I know exactly those sort of people that you're talking about. Um, and not that I do it on purpose, but I think I almost try to, I don't want to say embarrass them, but you know,
Yeah,
sort of embarrass them, that just to act like a normal person.
right? Yeah, that's all we're asking for. And people around here are very nice. They, offered to open doors for me, and if I drop something here, let me get that for you. It's just, I don't have any problem. It might be a little different in, say, a big city like New York, but hey,
No,
um,
funny you mentioned that. I was just thinking about that the other day, Kevin, is that one thing that I found with since being injured and disabled is I can really now see the humanity in people. That like you were just saying, that offer to help me, like when I'm trying to get my walker out of the car, a person will actually stop their car and ask if I need help, or really anything that I need. I volunteer at a university nearby, and
oh,
all the students are offering to help me walk to the where I have to go. And
that's
you
great.
know so I definitely, you know out of this impairment that we have, you see a lot of good.
Yeah, you do. Um, you just have to allow yourself to notice it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, it's been real nice talking to you, and you're the second person in a row that's kind of up there in the Northeast. So
Oh.
I don't know how your weather is doing right now, but I certainly hope it's doing better than mine.
Well, anytime you need to talk about this or related to this, I'm always available, Kevin.
It was very informational.
That was a great interview. Thomas is such a nice guy.
Unusual way of having a spinal cord injury.
Yeah, it really is. Not to be down on SCI or spinal cord injuries, but over next, it's more run of the mill, or at least has knowledge of run of the mill type injuries.
Well, it can happen to anyone, anywhere, anyway. That's
Right.
what I learned out of it.
Right? And this just happened to be one of those ways you don't typically think about it. So it's a good example, I guess.
Yeah.
Till next time, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye now.